Okay, let me show you my audience members. Say hello, everyone. Is that everybody? There we go. Okay. Let's see. My name is Elizabeth, and this is my persuasive speech. Can everybody see the PowerPoint?
Yeah. Yes.
I think I can.
Great. Okay. Let's brighten that up for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I want to take a trip down memory lane with all of you right now. So think back to when you were in high school, maybe in your physics class or your biology class or your math class or something like that. And think about how much of the content for that class really stuck with you. Okay? So think about one concept that you just really remember. Okay? Now I want you to think about why that concept stuck with you. Okay. So if you were lucky, it's probably because your teacher used some hands-on activity that really embedded that idea in your brain. Is that the case with anyone here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Okay,
Yes.
good. Well, these hands-on activities that we're talking about, they're a huge element of project-based instruction. And project-based instruction is the exact opposite of lecture-style teaching that we see so often today. Unfortunately, today, project-based instruction is highly lacking in our classrooms at the secondary level. And I want you to think about it, because if teachers continue to ignore the option of project-based instruction and continue to use lecture-style teaching methods, our students are going to continue to decline in their performance. Okay? So in my speech, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about why project-based instruction is needed in high school classrooms and what we can make sure, or what we can do to make sure it's implemented. Okay. Because of the huge emphasis on high-stakes testing and standardized tests, students are forced to retain huge amounts of information, and this is dictated by state and national standards, obviously. For this reason, Paul Murphy says in a 2013 article titled, "Relax, it's only a test," teachers feel overwhelmed. They don't know what to do. They turn to brute force lectures so that students will pass these standardized tests. So it's not surprising that the majority of high school teachers today admit to using the old, familiar, popular teaching style, a lecture followed by a couple of worksheets, maybe a take-home written assignment, and then a test at the end of a chapter or a unit, something like that. Unfortunately, this teaching style is just not working for students. Murphy goes on to state that in the United States, high schoolers' performance, particularly in the science, technology, engineering, and math fields, has decreased steadily over the past 2 decades. According to Matthew Costa in a 2000 article titled, "Does Teaching Style Matter?" All of this can be attributed to American teachers' attachment to the lecture. Lectures are failing students in a number of ways. And in case you don't believe me, I'm going to mention a few. They fail to engage students and hold their attention. They don't allow the teacher to get feedback during lectures. If it's just all talk and no questioning, no interaction, how does the teacher know where the student's at? They require the entire class to move at one pace. We all know learners, they learn at different speeds, they learn in different ways, okay? And they avoid real-life applications. Often it's just formulas and essays, and there's no application to it. And lastly, lectures only cater to auditory learners, so they ignore the students with other learning styles, like verbal, visual, physical, and so on. So you can see that we have a crucial issue on our hands when it comes to secondary education. The current teaching style, it's just not cutting it. So with that in mind, it's our job to come up with a solution. Okay? And I'm here to tell you that project-based instruction is the solution. Okay? When teachers lecture, they attempt to pour knowledge from their heads directly into students' minds. It's a technique that involves so much memorization and not enough critical thinking. On the other hand, project-based instruction forces the students to question. They have to investigate, they have to conjecture, formulate, they have to think critically. This is all according to Jason Ravitz in the 2010 issue of Peabody Journal of Education. So the project-based instruction format, the lesson plan, sort of goes like this. The teacher starts with an engagement piece where he or she simply engages the students with a real-world problem or a project or a task or something like that. And then from there, it's up to the students. The teacher gives the students all of the resources they need to investigate that problem or that issue. And of course, the teacher guides them slightly, nudges them in the right direction. And so that's their exploration piece. And by the time they're done with that exploration piece, they've happened upon some pattern, they've drawn some conclusion, and basically they've put together their own knowledge. They've constructed their own ideas, their own theories, and the teacher follows up with that in the explanation piece, where she basically confirms what they've learned or corrects them if they've gone astray. So she brings in the standard or the topic to which the activity is related, and she confirms their findings. Okay. This process, some of you may be familiar, you may not. It's closely related to constructivism, which is a learning theory made really popular by John Dewey in the early 20th century. And according to constructivism, the student learns by taking pre-existing knowledge and coupling that with new knowledge, and they just merge that together, and they draw their own conclusions based on all of the information that they have at hand. And this is all according to Baerbold in the 2013 issue of Integrative Psychological and Behavioral Science. So essentially, the student constructs his or her own knowledge, and in the end, the student has learned a lot, but the teacher has not done the traditional lecture or the pouring of knowledge into their heads. So it's a lot more meaningful for the student. So let's look at an example. Let's say a teacher is covering the triangle inequality theorem. I don't know if you're familiar, but I'll tell you about it. It states that the sum of the lengths of two sides of a triangle must be bigger than the length of the third side. Okay? So the teacher might choose to present this information in a lecture, write the formula on the board, write the theorem. The students will have to memorize it, regurgitate it on a test. It's all very textbook. On the other hand, the teacher might choose to go the project-based instruction route and give the students rods of different lengths and ask them to construct lots of triangles and record the measurements. And eventually, they're going to stumble upon the triangle inequality theorem on their own. So which lesson do you think is going to be more effective? The second one? Right, because they're doing their own thing. They're not relying on a teacher. They're learning it, right. Okay, so hopefully you can see that project-based instruction is truly a teaching style centered around constant questioning, complex tasks, and relevant connections. And for this reason, it's obviously a feasible solution to the crisis we're currently facing in secondary education. So now that we're aware of a solution to the problem, why should we utilize it? Good question. Project-based instruction would do away with the disadvantages of lecturing mentioned earlier, while still addressing the state and national standards. According to Panison in the June 2010 issue of Journal of Social Sciences, implementing PBI, and I use PBI just as an abbreviation, square, PBI fully engages students. It allows teachers to get immediate feedback. It lets them move at their own pace because they're working in groups and bouncing ideas off of each other. And it lets them use real-world problems and circumstances so that the information is relevant to them. And lastly, it addresses all of the learning types. Okay. So you can see then why PBI is much better of an alternative to typical lecturing. You may be wondering now what we can do to affect this change. You know that teaching through lecture is putting high school students at a disadvantage. You know that PBI is a very plausible solution and that its benefits far outweigh those of the current teaching method. So I encourage you to talk to the administrators in your local school system. Ask them to do PBI workshops for their teachers. If you have a connection with teachers in your school system, talk to them. Ask them what are their hesitations about it. What can I do to make you more comfortable with it? And lastly, just talk about PBI. Talk about it in your community, on social networking. Do anything you can to make everyone aware of this fantastic teaching method. Because by doing this, you're working towards giving high school students a shot at a meaningful, effective learning experience. Okay. So we've seen that project-based instruction is the way to go when it comes to STEM education. And now it's your job to make sure everyone else does too. Thank you very much.
Encore.
Thank y'all.